Hi everyone, welcome back. Thanks for joining us today. We've got a brand new story to share with you. So let's begin. My name is Jerry. I stood alone by my mother's hospital bed and watched her as she passed. My wife and my only older brother never showed up. It was the sealed letter my mom had instructed the nurse to hand over to me when she died that opened my eyes to everything, and I will be telling you all about it. Growing up, I was always what you'd call a mama's boy because my mom was my rock. After we lost my dad in a terrible motor accident, she became everything: mother, father, protector, provider. I was just a kid when it happened, but even then, I remember how her back never bent under the weight of raising two boys alone. She worked long hours, made sure we never lacked food on the table, and somehow still managed to be present. I clung to her strength because it was the only thing that felt stable when everything else had fallen apart. That bond we shared didn't fade with time. If anything, it grew stronger as I got older. Even when I became a man and started building my own life, I never lost sight of where I came from and who helped shape me. After losing the love of her life so early, my mother developed this deep fear of us, her sons, repeating the same pattern. My dad had gotten married late, well into his late 30s, and she felt like life had robbed them of more time together. That fear became a guiding principle for her. She sat us down more than once and said, "Don't wait too long. Find someone and build your life while you're still young enough to enjoy it." She said it with love, but there was a bit of desperation in her voice, like she was trying to protect us from a clock we couldn't see ticking. My older brother wasn't having it. He flat out refused. Said he wasn't going to be pressured into marriage just to please anyone. That decision caused real tension between him and our mother. What started as arguments turned into silence, and eventually they drifted apart. He saw it as control, and she never forgave him for what she saw as rebellion. Me? I was different. Maybe I was more sensitive to her worries, or I just didn't want to disappoint the only parent I had left. I got married before I turned 30 to a woman named Lydia. I thought I was doing the right thing. But after a few years of being married, there was a strain between my mother and Lydia. My mom never said anything directly, but I could feel it. She tried to keep it cordial, probably because she didn't want to come between me and my marriage, but I could tell she didn't trust Lydia. There was always this undercurrent of skepticism, like she was waiting for something to go wrong. I didn't want to believe it, so I ignored it for as long as I could. Then one day, out of nowhere, my mother called me and said she needed to talk. We met, and she asked me to transfer all the assets I had in my name into a trust she had created. I was confused at first, but then she looked me in the eye and said, "Don't tell Lydia. Just do it." There was no anger in her voice, just concern, like she was preparing for something she couldn't quite explain. I didn't ask too many questions. I just did it. Everything went into the trust, and Lydia never knew. Looking back now, I realize how much my mother must have seen, or at least suspected, to go to such lengths. But at the time, I saw it as her just being overly cautious. I never imagined how right she'd turn out to be. When my mom's cancer came back, it hit harder than the first time. 3 years ago, we thought we beat it. We really believed she had turned a corner. But this time was different. Her body just didn't have the strength to fight anymore. The doctors said it straight. There wouldn't be another round of remission. So every day after work, I'd go straight to the hospital. No detours. No nights off. I'd sit beside her bed for hours, sometimes watching her sleep, sometimes just holding her hand while she talked about memories I didn't even realize she still held on to. I'd leave work drained and walk into that hospital already tired. But I stayed. Being there for her now wasn't even a question. But I was doing all of it alone. My brother didn't show. I'd call him, text him, leave voicemails. Every time it was the same response: "I'll come by tomorrow. Work's crazy right now. Next weekend for sure." After a while, I just stopped reaching out. It was too much to keep begging someone to show up for their own mother when she's dying. And the truth? I started to resent him for it. Not because I needed the help, but because she deserved better than silence from the son she raised. Then there was Lydia, my wife. She showed up once. That first emergency that led to Mom being admitted again, she was there. But after that, nothing. Her excuse was that hospitals give her anxiety, and she stuck to it. I'd come home after sitting by my mother's hospital bed all evening, and Lydia would be on the couch watching TV, scrolling her phone, or complaining about her day. It was like she'd emotionally disconnected herself from the situation entirely. It was worse than indifference. It was like she didn't care at all. And look, I noticed it. I felt the coldness, the distance, but I was exhausted and grieving. I didn't have the energy to fight that battle on top of everything else. One Saturday evening, I was alone in the hospital room with my mother. Just me, her, and the soft beeping of the monitors keeping track of her heartbeat. The doctors had already warned me that it was only a matter of time, that she wouldn't last much longer. He didn't have to say it twice. I could see it myself. Her skin was pale, her breathing shallow. She looked so small in that hospital bed. But still, I was praying for a miracle. This was the woman who had always seemed strong, even when life kept throwing hard things her way. And now, here she was, slipping away right in front of me. I went back into the room and sat by her bedside. She opened her eyes and looked at me. Her voice was weak, but she still had that gentle smile. "Are you the only one here?" she asked. I told her no, others would come soon. She didn't argue, just nodded slightly and said, "I know they won't." And the way she said it, like she had already made peace with that disappointment. Then she looked at me and said, "Jerry, I love you with all my heart." She reached out with what little strength she had left and squeezed my hand. "When I go to join your father, I want you to call my lawyer. He'll help you with everything. Everything I own. It's yours now." I tried not to break down right there. "You're not going anywhere," I told her. "You're going to recover. You'll get through this. For me." But she just smiled. "My time's close," she whispered. I held her hand, refusing to let go. And then, in one long exhale, she was gone. Even though I'd been preparing for that moment, it still shattered something inside me. Watching the life leave someone you love isn't something you can ever really be ready for. I sat there, numb, listening to the monitor go silent. After the doctor came in and confirmed her passing, I stepped out into the hallway and did what I thought was the right thing. I tried to call my brother. Of course, no answer. Same as always, busy. Then I tried Lydia. Straight to voicemail. I sent both of them texts telling them that my mother had passed away. I waited. No replies. It was like I was grieving alone. A few minutes later, as I was gathering my things, one of the nurses approached me gently. She held something in her hand, a sealed envelope. She said, "Your mother asked me to give you this when the time came." I took it silently and walked out to my car. I didn't want to open it there in the hallway with people walking by. I sat in the driver's seat and just stared at the envelope for a while. It had my name written on it in her handwriting. That alone almost broke me. When I finally opened it, it was a letter, all handwritten, pages full of her love, her thoughts, her goodbyes. She talked about how proud she was of me, how she wished she had more time, and how much she missed my dad. It felt like hearing her voice again, one last time. But then, about halfway through, the tone shifted. The handwriting stayed the same, but the words felt heavier. She wrote, "Jerry, I need to tell you something I didn't have the heart to say before, but you need to know." That's when everything changed. She told me that she had seen something that broke her heart. She had caught Lydia, my wife, being intimate with my brother. She had seen it with her own eyes. She hadn't told me before because she didn't want to hurt me. She wanted to protect me from the pain, but she also couldn't ignore what she saw. She didn't stop there. She had quietly hired a private investigator to follow them and get evidence. What he found confirmed everything. The affair between Lydia and my brother had been going on for a long time. She also dropped another bombshell. My brother was adopted. I never knew. And apparently, ever since he found out, he'd started pulling away from the family. Started saying our mom was biased, that she loved me more than him. I always thought he was distant by nature, but there was a bitterness in him I never fully understood until now. My mother ended the letter by saying the evidence was in the care of her lawyer. She wanted me to know the truth, to have the whole picture. I sat there in the car, the letter in my hands, and I realized I'd just lost my mother. And at the same time, I lost the image I had of my marriage, of my brother, of everything I thought was solid. The people I should have been able to lean on during the hardest moment of my life weren't just absent. They were the cause of another kind of death. The death of trust. And that was only the beginning. When I got home that night with a hole in my chest, I didn't know how to carry on. I walked into the house to my wife, Lydia, in the living room, laughing hard as she was on the phone. When she saw me, her laughter died on her lips. She slowly lowered the phone. "Oh, you're back," she said. I didn't speak right away. I didn't trust myself to. My chest was still heavy from everything. But I needed to ask. I needed to hear it from her mouth. "Why didn't you show up when she died?" I asked. She didn't hesitate or pretend. She just shrugged and said it straight. "I didn't want to be fake. I hated her, Jerry. And I didn't think you'd need me there. You've always been a mama's boy anyway." I remember staring at her, trying to decide if I'd heard right. I felt something in me harden. I already knew I was going to meet the lawyer tomorrow, so I didn't argue. There was no need to show my hand when the game hadn't even started yet. I just looked at her one more time, nodded slightly, and walked past her into the bedroom. I knew one thing for sure: this marriage was over. She just didn't know it yet. The next day, I walked into the lawyer's office. I wasn't exactly eager to be here, but this was something I had to do. The lawyer, an old friend of my late father's, had been the one to handle our family's legal matters for years. He had been a steady presence in our lives, even when my mom was still around. He gave me a look of understanding, like he knew what I was here to discuss. He handed me the folder. It was thick, heavier than I expected. I flipped open, my eyes scanning over what was inside. Photos, USB flash, hotel check-ins, all concrete evidence that my mother had known about Lydia and my brother's affair. I felt like I was reading something out of a bad soap opera, except this was my life. It was real. My mother had been watching over everything, even when I didn't realize it. My mother had already anticipated that Lydia might leave me once she found out about her affair with my older brother, and that's why she had me put everything in a trust under her name. She knew what my brother was capable of, and she had tried to protect me from both of them in the only way she could. But the more I went through everything, the worse it got. The letter my mother had written to me didn't even mention half of the details that were in these files. My brother had threatened her, tried to intimidate her into keeping quiet about the affair. It all made sense now. The distance between me and my brother, the way he had been avoiding me and making excuses whenever I tried to reach out. I always thought he was just busy, but now it felt like he was too busy scheming. I didn't want to admit it to myself, but the fact that my mother had seen all this coming, had set everything up to protect me, was hitting me hard. She'd been protecting me from more than just her death. She had been protecting me from my own family. There was no time for emotions right now. Before I could process anything further, there was a knock on the door. My brother was standing in the doorway. He walked in without even looking at me, his face hard, like he was angry about something. I didn't know what he was here for, but I didn't care to ask. The lawyer stood up and motioned for him to sit. There was no pleasantries exchanged, no small talk. The lawyer didn't waste any time. He pulled out the will that my mother had amended 3 months before her death. My brother didn't even flinch as the lawyer started reading it aloud. But when he got to the part where everything was willed to me, my brother's face twisted in disbelief. "What is this?" he demanded, his voice shaking with anger. "This can't be right. You manipulated her. You did something to make her change the will. She wouldn't have left everything to you." The lawyer didn't even blink. He simply replied, "There's nothing to dispute. Your mother was examined by 2 licensed physicians before she amended the will. Both of them confirmed she was of sound mind." My brother's face turned red with frustration. He sputtered out more accusations, but they all fell flat. The lawyer had the facts, and my brother didn't have anything that could challenge them. The will was clear. My mother had left everything to me. No amount of shouting or accusations could change that. Finally, my brother stood up and stormed out of the room. The lawyer turned to me and gave me a look of sympathy. "Are you sure about what you're going to do next, Jerry?" he asked. I nodded slowly. There was no turning back now. Not after everything that had come to light. Not after everything I had seen and heard. I'm going to take her advice, I said quietly. I'm going to divorce Lydia. And when I do, I'm going to make sure she has nothing left. The lawyer gave a small nod, clearly not surprised by my answer. He asked if I had an attorney lined up yet. I hadn't thought that far ahead, honestly. But when he offered to recommend someone, I didn't hesitate either. Go ahead, I said. Later that night, I walked into the house. Lydia was lounging on the couch. When she saw me, it was like she knew something was off. So I said to her, my mother left me a gift. A letter. Photos too. Hotel check-ins. You and my brother, right? I watched her face drain of color, and for a moment I thought she might break down, but she didn't. Instead, she tried to play it off, stammering out something like, "It happened years ago, Jerry." It wasn't like that. It wasn't a big deal. I wasn't having it. I'd heard enough lies from her. I cut her off before she could go any further. Your cold attitude toward my mother earned you no space in my world, I said, trying to keep my voice steady, though inside, everything was crumbling. How could I ever look at her the same again? How could I ever forgive this? She smirked. So you're divorcing me then? She asked, as if she was daring me to follow through. I simply said, watch and see. And with that, I turned away, leaving her there in the silence, the house colder than I ever thought it could be. The divorce papers arrived days after. Lydia wasn't just going to let go of everything without a fight. She came at me with everything she had, demanding half of my assets. But here's the thing, she didn't know the full story, or at least, not all the legal details I had going for me. Her lawyers put up this whole narrative, saying I was leaving her after I inherited my mother's estate, trying to frame it like I was some cold-hearted guy who just tossed her aside. They claimed I'd suddenly become wealthy, and now I was using that to justify abandoning her. And on paper, that might have looked convincing. But my legal team wasn't just going to let her get away with that. They fought back hard. They argued that I was broke, that none of this so-called inheritance was technically mine. All the assets, including the house, were held in the trust my mother had set up years ago. See, Lydia didn't know this, but none of the wealth that came from my mother's estate was directly tied to me. It wasn't in my name. It was all controlled by the trust, meaning Lydia's claim that I was suddenly rich didn't hold any legal weight. Her lawyers kept pushing for that half, but my team showed that I had no access to it. Everything was locked up in that trust. Her whole strategy started to crumble. And on top of all that, there was the other issue, the affair. The evidence from my mother's private investigator, those photos, the hotel check-ins, it all came into play. Lydia couldn't argue her way out of the fact that she'd betrayed me with my own brother. That was a huge part of why I wasn't willing to give her a single cent. My legal team wasn't just defending my financial situation, they were defending my dignity, too. But the thing with divorce cases like this is that they never really move fast. The entire process dragged on for months. And during that time, Lydia's legal fees started piling up. The more she fought, the more it cost her. You could see it. She was getting desperate. Eventually, she tried to settle out of court. She came to me with an offer, trying to get me to agree to something that would let her walk away with more. I wasn't going to let her off easy, especially after everything that had happened. I refused. In the end, the court ruled in my favor. Lydia got nothing reasonable, at least. Sure, she might have thought she could manipulate the situation, but in the end, the law wasn't on her side. She thought she could use the divorce to get her hands on my inheritance, but it didn't work out that way. She ended up with nothing, and honestly, she deserved it. So, the fight for the inheritance wasn't just between me and Lydia. My brother also dragged me to court. I honestly was expecting it. He had always thought, for whatever reason, that he'd get at least half of what she had. Then, there was Lydia. She had her own set of expectations. When my mother died, she figured she could easily slide into my brother's life, take whatever she could from the inheritance, and leave me behind. But things didn't go as planned. With the legal debts hanging over her head from the divorce, she wasn't bringing much to the table in my brother's eyes. He had no intention of taking her in and dealing with that mess. Months after everything went down, Lydia tried reaching out to me. I don't think she ever thought things would turn out like this. My mother had helped me see through her act. Lydia had been using me as a stepping stone, thinking she'd get away with everything without any consequences. But when my brother shut her down, leaving her stranded without a plan, she had nowhere to go. All the plans, all the manipulation, it was crumbling around her, and I didn't feel bad about it at all. She had gotten everything she deserved. When Lydia tried reaching out again, I wasn't surprised. She even played the victim card, asking me if I had ever really loved her, questioning everything we'd been through. But I wasn't fooled anymore. So, I told her exactly how it was. You wanted to act like I'd be weak, grieving. I said, you thought I'd beg. Instead, I buried my mother and my marriage the same week. You'll live with what you did for the rest of your life. That was it. There was no more pretending. There was no coming back from that. And then I ended it for good. I told her, don't contact me again. And I meant it. There was nothing left to say. What had been broken was never going to be fixed.